Good evening.
Good evening.
Glad you could join us. Glad you could join us. What is this? Halloween Eve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, eat lots of candy tomorrow. Say that. So, before we get started, we'll bow our heads and go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you have made and that you have given to us. And we just thank you for another time to gather on a Wednesday afternoon to study another Bible character. We just pray, Lord, that the lessons that we learned tonight, that we can apply to our lives and just help us draw closer to you. We ask all things in your Son, Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. Amen. All right, well, we're still in the Old Testament. We're still in the book of Genesis again, so as we were last week. And we're going to start with chapter 11. Well, actually, we're going to start with chapter 12. But I need to give you some background with what happens in chapter 11. In chapter 11, we have the story of the Tower of Babel. So people are getting smart, and they have one language, and then God decides that He is going to confuse them and separate them so that they can't do things like that. So there's a question in there somewhere, but I'm not going to ask it. Question or two. Actually, we're still in chapter 11 because we get to verse 24 because we need some genealogy here because we're going to study Lot. So if you have Genesis chapter 11 and we get to verse 24, and if you read the names, don't, just say them. Nobody's going to correct you. We have a man named Nahor, or however you want to say it, Mr. N. And he has a son named Terah. And Terah has a son by the name of
Abram.
That's right, who later became Abraham. So we'll just call him Abraham, if that's okay. I kind of get confused and lost back and forth. So we have Abraham, and then one of Abraham's brothers was named after his grandfather, Nahor, and the other was named Haran. And we're in verse 27. And he had a son, and anybody want to guess what his son's name was?
Lot.
There you go. It's a good group. Can't get anything by you guys. That's true. I thought, man, if they whiff on that one, it's going to be a long night.
And they all came from Shem, Noah's son Shem.
That's right. See? And that would make Lot Abraham's nephew. Very good. Sharp. All right, then we get to verse 28. And while his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans in the land of his birth. So that's Lot's dad, and he dies. Okay, then they don't mention his mom at all, so that's not surprising. On that goes that verse 31, we find out something important. What do we find out there about Lot? Anybody want to read verse 31 of chapter 11?
Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur to the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. When they came to Haran, they settled there.
Okay, so his grandfather takes him along with Abraham and Abraham's wife, right? And they depart for Ur and head for Canaan, but they settle in Haran before getting to Canaan. Guess you could correctly say they stopped short of their destination, didn't they? Quite get there. Do you know anything about Lot's mother? No, I already said that. That doesn't stop us from some conjecture, though, does it? Here are my guesses.
Wasn't in that day, didn't brothers take their,
His mother may have died too,
oh.
right? His mom could have died as well, and
She
that's
could have, yes.
right. I mean, that's a possibility.
Yes.
Maybe she still lived there, but then Terah decided to claim his grandson as his own and raise him, which is very common in that part of the world during those times, right? So I think one of those two things happened, probably the second part. He just went with him. It's like, we're leaving. So see you later. So why do you think, here's another conjecture, why do you think Terah didn't keep going to Canaan? It says he stopped. Your guess is as good as mine.
It wasn't time yet.
Wasn't time yet. I didn't have that one. That's actually better than mine.
He got tired of walking.
I mean,
It could have been. It could have been
He
health
was-
related in some
he was
way.
205 when he died there.
Yeah, I know. Get worn and usually travel by foot. So he could have been health related, and he decided this is good enough. Maybe fear crept in, and he's like, "Oh, this looks like a nice place, and we don't really know what's ahead of us, so we'll just stay here. This looks nice."
Or it sounded good because that's the same name as his brother, as Lot's dad.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, hey, good place to stop. And he just may have liked the climate there. Hey, this is pretty nice here. We haven't looked at the weather report ahead, and it might be lousy. Yeah, I don't think they had the Weather Channel back then. Oh, no.
Yeah.
So good enough. Well, I mean, could have been any of those things or a combination. So then we get to Genesis 12, and Terah dies, and we read where God tells Abraham to leave Haran, which he does. So I need someone to read Genesis 12, verses 4 and 5.
So Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there.
Okay. So thank you, Darlene. So what do we learn about Lot in these verses? He, smart guy, goes along, right, with his uncle. Been good to me, so why not? Nothing else to do. I'll tag along. Did he leave anything behind?
It doesn't seem like it.
No. Memories. I don't know. Yeah. It says he took everything with him, right?
Yeah.
Took all he owned. Which, I guess if you're going to take everything with you, you probably have no intentions of going back. See you later. So I think that was probably the case here. Okay, and the rest of chapter 12 tells us about a severe famine which made Abraham change course and go to Egypt. Do we know in this chapter if Lot went with him? I mean, we know he left,
Well,
with him,
the
but
first
did he
verse
go
of
to Egypt?
I'm sorry, the first verse of 13 says
Says
when
that.
Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him. So
So the answer is no. We're not told in 12. But when we
I'm
read
sorry,
on,
13.
exactly, no, you're right,
Yeah.
that's right, Connie. So you get to 13:1, that we read that he does, and he travels north or northeast, and which is an area that's due south of Canaan. And Sarah leaves with him, as does Lot. So we can surmise then if Lot leaves Egypt with them, then he must what? Have been there. I'm telling you, I'll make a great detective. I'm just saying. No comments, Matt. Please.
Oh, the dogs.
Right?
Really?
Okay. So Genesis 13:2 then tells us that Abraham has become very wealthy, hasn't he? Yeah. In livestock and in silver and gold. So then we skip down to verse 5. And what do we read about Lot?
Well, he'd have accumulated some things also.
Yeah, he had flocks and herds and tents, and so he was very wealthy, as the New Living Translation says. He was wealthy. He became very wealthy as well. So, pretty smart guy. He hitched his horses to the right wagon, so to speak. Correct?
Yeah.
So he's accumulated a lot. Then what do we find out in verse 6? Something happens in verse 6.
Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together.
Okay, so rich guy 1 and rich guy 2 can't coexist so closely because and they have flocks and herds and stuff, and they need what? Pasture land. And so they need lots of wide open spaces when you have lots of animals like that to graze. So they decided that, hey, we need to do something here or we're going to lose all we have. They won't lose their silver and gold, but they will lose their livestock, and that'd be very costly, right? So, and this presented problems, didn't it? Because what happens in verse 7 there? I mean, they haven't realized that they need to go their separate ways yet, but I think it's dawning on them.
Yeah, their herdsmen are quarreling.
Yeah, they're fighting. And
it also says that the Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at the time, so
right.
that was
So-
quite a bit.
It's getting pretty crowded.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they could have been stealing from them or any
Yeah.
number of things. We don't know. They could have been good neighbors, but they could have frowned on, is that a cow in my backyard there? That kind of thing. Right? So they were arguing, and I have a hunch it wasn't whether or not it's better to be a Democrat or a Republican or who was going to win the World Series. I'm sure they were arguing about. Because remember, if they didn't brand them, how would they know whose was whose? Right? And
Well, they wouldn't.
they're not staying up all night, probably watching. Well, they couldn't see anyway, with a lantern. But if they happened to roam,
But weren't they mostly sheep?
probably. Mostly sheep, but it says livestock, so it doesn't say sheep, just sheep. So could have a number of different types of animals. So what's the solution? Read verses. Go ahead and read verse 8 and 9 and talk about that.
So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left."
Okay, so the solution is, hey, let's not bicker. Let's not have our men fighting about this. He's a smart guy. We both have more than we really need, so to speak. We have plenty. God's really blessed us. So it's only going to do us harm not to get along. So look at all this.
Yeah.
It's almost like the promised land, right? And he says, whatever you take's fine with me. It says a lot about Abraham, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So let's see. I have a question here. So Lot accepted Abraham's generosity, but it doesn't say that he was grateful, does it? Or that he tried to convince Abraham to make the first choice. Do you think he was thankful for the offer? Doesn't say he was. Do you think he was giddy? I think he was. I think he was appreciative. I think he was like, this is nice. My uncle's giving me first choice. Just because it doesn't say that, this is where we get into trouble, I think.
Well,
Right.
it
What
says
about
what
verse
he-
10?
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Hold on. Because if we stop right there, because sometimes I think we jump to conclusion by things that are omitted, or in a biblical account like that, just right there. Say, well, and say he was thankful because I might step on some toes here. I'm looking down that way. I've heard people say that we shouldn't have musical instruments, right, in worship service because why? It doesn't say that they had them in the first century church, does it? Doesn't say they had them. But here's my thing. It doesn't say that they didn't have them, and it doesn't say they were forbidden, does it? It just
Does
they
not.
didn't. So it's like this. It's never recorded in the Bible, ever, that Jesus laughed. How many think that Jesus never, ever laughed? We all think he did, but it doesn't say he did.
True.
So we have to be careful. Just because it's not in there doesn't mean it didn't happen or that it's not okay. Right?
Right. But
Unless it's expressly forbidden and something like that. Yeah,
they had instruments.
yeah, I know they did.
The lyre and the harp.
Yes, and they played them.
I know.
Yeah, cowbells.
Okay, so verses 10 through, I just had to go out. Verses 10 and 12, 10 through 12, 10, 11, and 12, in verse 13. So Lot looks up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt toward Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. So he chose the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley and settled near Sodom. Okay. Verse 13 says what about Sodom?
Now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord.
Okay, so the question is, did Lot know the men of Sodom were wicked and constantly sinning before he settled nearby? Did he know that?
It doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that. Very good. Catch on. That's a short. You should join us live, people. It's impressive. That's right, it doesn't. But it doesn't say they did, doesn't say he didn't. Does it?
No.
And it's odd that he chose that spot. You know, I mean, maybe it is, maybe it's not.
Well, if it's fertile and it's green,
Mhm.
then it's a choice piece of property. I
Yes,
think.
well, true.
So I think he was greedy.
Okay. Well, or I've got an ABC on this one. A, he thought, I can convert them to one true God and stop their behavior, right? Okay, maybe not. He wouldn't be affected by that because that was them and not him justifying going there. Besides, this was a better choice of ground, so that's what he was interested in. Or C, his walk with the Lord wasn't that important to him, so he was intrigued by these men. So it's like, hey, I get all this ground, plus these guys are kind of an interesting group over here, if he knew anything about it. Again,
Or all the
he's
above.
going to find out, we know that,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Well,
so, but whether or not he did when he chose that, we don't know.
It does say, when he settles there, he settles in the city.
He did.
So he wasn't much for the open range.
No. That nomad life wasn't for him.
Well, he had servants to take care of and
True.
I know.
Herdsmen,
people to take care of the flocks and
Right.
everything, so.
He did. So we go on then to chapter 14, unless someone else had a question on something in 13. Because they part their ways, they go their wicked, or they go their different ways. And then in verse 14, or chapter 14, we have a battle. And Lot in verse 12, and it's a long battle too. They fought for 12 years here and 2 more years here. So in verse 12 of chapter 14, the kings, verse 11, the 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food. Then they went away. And in verse 12, they also carried off Abraham's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. He was living near Sodom, now he's living in Sodom. They kind of moved. Yeah, you're right. So he's, and as far as we know, because again, it said, now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. And nowhere from chapter 13, verse 13 to chapter 14, verse 12, do we see that ever changed.
No.
Right?
Right.
All we do know is that he not only moved close, he moved in with them. He's in the city with these wicked people. Right? Okay. So he's carried away along with his possessions. Have you ever wondered why Lot stuck around? Why would he go there? And not only, but going on in to, I mean, not just close by, but now he's immersed himself into that culture.
Well, personally, it looks to me like Lot really wasn't the leader. He was a follower.
Oh, yeah.
And so if he wasn't going to be with Abraham, he was trying to find some company.
Yeah, well, Abraham was definitely a leader.
Yeah.
So he had every opportunity to learn how to be a leader,
Yeah.
didn't he? So, one of the commentaries' explanation was this: Lot's greedy desire for the best of everything led him to sinful surroundings. Mentioned that earlier. Sherry did, about his greed. His burning desire for possessions and success cost his freedom and enjoyment. As captive of Kedorlaomer, Lot faced torture, slavery, or death. Bringing it into our 21st century world, in much the same way, we can be enticed by doing things or going places we shouldn't. The prosperity some long for is captivating. It can both entice us and enslave us if our motives are not in line with God's desires. That's the case with him, right? Okay, so Abraham learns that Lot has been taken captive and says, well, he deserves that. That's no good nephew of mine. No, he didn't. And he comes to his rescue. Okay, read verse 16. What does it say there?
So he brought back all the goods and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people.
Yeah. Wearing the white hat and strolling in on a horse and saved the day. There's Abraham, right? Abraham, he not only brings back Lot, he just doesn't bring his nephew back. He brings the other people and their possessions. So he's not leaving them high and dry. He's so it tells me that Lot goes from being wealthy to being captive to being wealthy again. Nice exchange, right? And he's free. So, what do you think Lot thought of his uncle Abraham now, if he didn't already?
I mean, I think he was probably grateful he came to get him.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm living right or something. Well, you'd have to think he's wonderful, wouldn't you? I mean, I can't imagine thinking anything other than that, but we're not told. So we don't hear anything more about Lot until chapter 19. That's the interesting thing. Story that most people know. Chapter 19. Good old Sodom and Gomorrah. But before we go there, a brief overview of chapter 18 is needed. Here we read where God has decided to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. I love this story. Abraham pleads with God to let him find righteous people. He starts with how many? Do you remember the story?
50.
50. And then he keeps whittling it down to, finally gets down to 10.
Oh, 10.
Right? And he said, if I can find 10 righteous people. 10. So from 50 down to 10. And does God say, you know what, I'm over this? No, he keeps letting him go down because God knows what does God know? He knows that
He
unless you
knows
get
it
the,
all.
Yeah. He knows it all.
you're still way too high. It's not going to happen. And God agrees, though, to spare the cities if he finds just 10 righteous people. And Abraham probably had, it's kind of comical, really, you think. He's like, 50, yeah, 50. He's like, that's too high. He's doing the numbers, talking to some people, thinking over in his mind, maybe 10, right? And I think he probably felt pretty confident, right? So where do we find, in verse 1 of 19, where do we find Lot?
Sitting at the gate.
He's right there in the middle of everything. There he is. Good
All
old.
those other people.
Yep. He's sitting in the gateway of the city. Okay. Why would he go back there
After,
when he knew it was a wicked place filled with vile and evil men? He has no excuse now, does he?
well,
Because he took
Up
his
until
possessions
this
back,
point.
so he could have taken those possessions anywhere.
up until this point, has anybody noticed anything that Lot has said about God?
Not one
No.
thing. He didn't have a relationship.
Right.
And there lies the problem.
That's
Then he recognized the angels.
Yeah. Well, I think
Yeah.
it'd probably be kind of hard not to.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, some of being with Abraham, and we're not actually told that Abraham's dad necessarily had a relationship. He didn't until Abraham. I think Abraham brought his dad to know the Lord. So, because they left. The rest of them stayed in that area.
Right.
But they left. But it wasn't just Abraham, which he could have gone on his own.
Right.
But his dad went too. So that says something there. So he saw that.
Yeah.
Again, of course, as we study with many characters, they've been, privy to a lot of great things, and then they just turn. So it's like, we see that too often, far too often. That's sad, really sad. So he's at the city gate, and why was he there?
Who knows?
Do you remember what happens if you remember some of the things some of the other stories we've had about
It goes
the
on.
entrance
City
to the
Meeting.
city and
It was the meeting
exact
place.
meeting place. The entrance to the city was the meeting place for city officials and
Government
other men to
action.
discuss things. And because remember, David's son, I believe, wasn't it, that went there and settled disputes and then won the hearts of the people, before they could get to
Boaz.
David. And
That's where Boaz went.
yeah, where Boaz went to because that's where business was transacted.
Right.
It was a place of authority and status where a person could see and be seen. Evidently, the commentary I read said that Lot held an important position in the government or associated with those who did, because that's where the angels found him, right there in that spot. Perhaps Lot's status in Sodom was one reason He was so reluctant to leave. Not only his possessions, but possessions gain you some status. And he says, I'm somebody here. So go somewhere else, I have to start all over. I don't feel like doing that. Right? So he shows generosity to the angels. What does he do there in verses 2 and 3?
Well, he invited them to come to his house.
Yeah, he does. Now, is that being really hospitable? Because, again, we have to remember the times. And he was only doing what the custom called for.
Right.
So he was generous, but he wasn't in a way, because back then the custom was that when a stranger found himself in need of lodging, he would often go to the city square. Ancient laws of hospitality demanded that someone offer lodging. So that's what he was doing. Perhaps Lot was so persuasive with the angels, though, because he feared for them, because he knew what the men there might do to them. So he had a heart. It's like, this is not a place for you guys. Just tell them. Right? And then in
Makes you
verse,
wonder if he knew that.
why was he there?
Exactly.
Hey, I'm not these guys. It won't rub off on me. Right? Someone's got to be the light in the darkness. No? Not buying that?
I'm not buying that.
Not buying that.
No, he's not showing a whole lot of light so far. So.
So this is when it gets kind of strange now. In verses 5 and 6. So anyway, verse 3, so they're going to stay in the square, and they say no, and he fixes food, they get, everything's good. And then verse 4, before the angels then have gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. And then verse 5, they called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we can have sex with them. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him. Smart guy. And said, no, my friends. And it's probably true, my friends. I'm in just a line. Don't do this wicked thing. Don't do this wicked thing. So he tries to convince them to change their minds. So
Let me do this wicked thing.
So what's this tell us about Lot? He does know the difference between right and wrong.
He
sees
knows
it.
what they do.
He knows what they do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
So-
then comes verse 8.
He does. He knows what they do. And then
Yeah.
then he has a solution there in verse 8. And what is the solution?
Take my daughters.
Yeah, take my daughters here. They've never been with a man. Don't do this wicked thing. Have them. And they're like, thanks, Dad. Appreciate you, Dad. That is so strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's beyond wicked.
Why would he do this? What do you think? What's his thinking here?
I can't even come up with a why. I mean, an answer to that.
Do you have your Bible? What does that say is the reference of the commentary on the bottom?
What verse?
I didn't read that.
You want me to read mine?
8.
Mine says that, it asks the question, how could any father give his daughters to be ravished by a mob of perverts just to protect two strangers? Possibly Lot was scheming to save both the girls and the visitors, hoping the girls' fiancés would rescue them, or that the homosexual men would be disinterested in the girls and simply go away. Although it was the custom of the day to protect guests at any cost, this terrible suggestion reveals how deeply sin had been absorbed into Lot's life. He had become hardened to evil acts in an evil city.
Yeah.
So it did remove. So whatever Lot's motives were, we see here an illustration of Sodom's terrible wickedness, a wickedness so great that God had to destroy the entire city. right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, to come up with that devious a plan,
He was depraved. I mean, his mind was just.
Yep.
Yeah.
so the men were like, and it worked, right? They said, okay,
Yeah.
no.
No.
They didn't like that Lot was looking down on them, right? Verse 9 tells us that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, who are you? Get out of the way. Because this fellow, and they're referring to who? Lot. Lot, you came here as an alien. You're a
He's
foreigner.
an outsider.
Outsider. Now, you're going to play judge. You're better than we are, all of a sudden, right? Okay. And we'll treat you worse than them. But he loved hearing that, didn't he?
Yeah.
And they kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. I've never heard how many men this was. I never heard a reference to a number. Has anybody ever? I don't even know what
Said
I've
they came from everywhere in the city.
Yeah, I know. So hundreds,
I don't know.
several hundreds.
Could be.
I think of, more than 10. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of a large
Yeah.
group,
See,
Like a mob.
like
Yeah.
a mob. Yeah, that's what I envision, but we're not told. Then let's see what. So he said, the men inside reached out. So the angels reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door.
Yeah.
Okay.
indeed.
Let's see. What was okay? And then, so they spared his life. Let's see what else. Then what happens in verse 11?
They struck the men blind, and
The angels did.
the angels did, and they couldn't find the door.
That's right. So they came to the rescue. They rescued him. So if they wouldn't have done that, who knows? It could have been really bad. But the time wasn't right yet. They could have just wiped them all out. They had that power, but they didn't. So then they give instructions to Lot. And they ask him a question. Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belong to you? I would assume that'd be servants, workers, some kind. Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. Makes you wonder how wicked that must have really been. Wow. We see some wickedness today, don't we? So then in verse 14, what is the son-in-law's reaction to Lot? He goes and talks to them, the ones who are pledged to marry his daughters. So not quite his sons-in-law, but I think back then once you were betrothed that they were considered married.
Same as Mary.
Well, they laughed at him. They thought he was
They were
joking.
joking.
Yeah. Why would they do that? The Lord's going to destroy the city, and they started laughing.
Because they lived in the city too.
Because they lived in the city too, and they didn't think anything of it. Why would? There's nothing wrong here. I mean, everybody's
They were of the
everybody's
same
entitled to
mind
do
he
what they
was.
want. What's the problem here? Because again, they're justifying things.
Yeah.
Correct. So
The part, here's what came to my mind after we read this part, where the angels came down to destroy Sodom.
Uh-huh.
And you put that together with where Abraham tried to talk God out of, if there's even, well, Lot really wasn't living for the Lord. So at this time, there wasn't anybody in Sodom
right.
that was righteous.
He nor his wife or daughters. So. He probably would have come the closest, I guess.
But yeah,
That would be 0. So, so 50 was really a high number. So they did. They thought he was joking. And, you know, again, they were just like, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not going to happen. Then in verse, so the dawn comes the next day, and the angels urge Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." In verse 16 says, when he hesitated. Knowing all this and what just happened, he hesitated. Why? Why?
He was of a depraved mind.
He thought he had it as good as it was going to get.
Yeah.
So why
He
would
didn't want to abandon his lifestyle.
Yeah.
He almost is like, do I want to die here or do I want to leave? Almost a pause like that. Okay, so he did. He hesitated. And then what happens? So he hesitates, and the men grab his hand and the hands of his wife and the 2 daughters, and they led them safely out of the city. For the Lord was merciful to them. Why do you think the angels took Lot's hand instead of just walking away from him and his family? Saying, dude, good luck. You know, we've given you every opportunity, all that you've seen here, and if you're going to hesitate, yeah, we're done.
God
Plenty of
God
opportunities.
had given them an assignment and
Plenty of opportunities, though, right?
carry it out. Yeah.
But Lot couldn't have said, "Hey, wait a minute," right? I mean, so why do you think? Why do you think that? Was it more than that, though? I think that it was because of Abraham.
That's what I think too. That Abraham loved Lot.
It was God's mercy toward Abraham,
Yeah.
extended to Lot and his family.
Yeah.
Because Abraham pleaded for Lot, God was merciful.
Yeah.
So, someone want to go to James in the New Testament, James chapter 5, verse 16, because there's a great verse there, and I know you know the verse. Once you get there, start reading it. Because I think this comes into play right here.
What did you say, James?
James 5:16.
There, 16:5.
Yeah.
James
Therefore,
5:16.
confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective.
There you go.
Prayer of a righteous man availeth much.
That's right. So the prayer of a righteous person, and we know what about Abraham?
He was righteous.
That's exactly. So he had talked to God, and so I think that's what applies here in my mind.
Yeah.
So God heard Abraham and said, you know, Lot, you're fortunate. So even after being instructed by the angels in verse 17 on what to do, flee and don't look back, Lot wants to do something else. What does he want to do? Verses 19 and 20 here. He's like negotiating. Your servant has favor. If your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me. Well, that's nice of him to say that, in sparing my life, which they did. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here's a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared. Why would he negotiate this? Do you really think what's the deal here? He wants to leave, but he doesn't want to go too far away?
I don't think he can take care of himself.
Maybe. And get up in the mountains and he's just going to be lost, or what? I mean, I would think at that time, you know, I don't have any bargaining chips or anything. I'm just going to listen. What'd you say? Okay, let's go.
Especially
Come on.
when they told him the city's going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Right.
What was he thinking?
I know.
Not take me to
Just like-
another city.
I don't want to go there. Can I go? And they're probably like, dude, what?
Well, there's
What else
nothing-
you want? You know, a
there's
few
nothing
camels along the way? I
exciting.
mean, huh?
Nothing exciting up in those mountains.
I guess.
And all
But,
he's got is his wife and his 2 daughters.
Yeah.
Except
That's
he ends
it.
up without his wife, so.
yeah. And none of the servants,
Nothing.
you know, so their herdsmen or any of them went with
So
them
he,
either.
he doesn't know how to take care of
No,
himself.
he doesn't.
It's
Yeah,
always
they have
been
nothing.
taken care of.
Yeah, that's true. It's a great point. It's a great point. So, but he still wanted to stay nearby. And so the angels agreed, which is kind of strange. Very well, we'll grant you this request too. I'm like, I don't really care where you go. You know? Then we look at each other. What did he say about that? What did he say? I think he said just destroy the city. Okay. Then he can go in. Right? Quick negotiation. And they granted it, and he said, I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it. And then by the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. And then verse 24, then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah. What a way to go. From the Lord out of the, so then thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, including all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land, so it wasn't good for anything. And then the sad, sad story, verse 26, Lot's wife looked back. And she was instructed not to
Not
do.
to.
Why did she do it?
She must have loved that lifestyle. She was leaving everything that she knew, and so she wanted one last glimpse.
One last look, what I'm leaving behind. And she lived in a culture that lying was probably second nature. So if someone told you something, you still did what you wanted to do. The angels instructed her not to do it. Disobedience was no big thing in Sodom and Gomorrah, was it? No, it was just part of life. So by her disobeying, she didn't think anything would really happen, did she? I mean, she wasn't
Obviously
100%
not.
sure.
Yeah.
So I'll look back. She probably wanted to a long time before she did. You know? Because she didn't do it right away.
Yeah.
So it just got the best of her. And she could, I mean, we don't know, we're not told, again, if there were screams and all this, you could imagine, depending on how far away you are, sulfur coming raining down on cities filled with people, the stench. I mean, no, all we're seeing is, we're reading things on a page. We don't have our other senses.
Right.
You know, we don't have the sense of smell and all that stuff that they would have had.
Well,
Makes it
sulfur smells bad
Yes.
anyway, and if
Yes.
it's burning,
Yes,
it's going to be really
yes,
awful.
you're right.
I didn't have.
And there would have been a glow behind you, which you can see
Yeah.
even if you're going this direction.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I didn't have time this afternoon to investigate and to check why a pillar of salt?
Yeah.
Why not just die and lay there? I mean, that has to be, I think, significant, but in some way, but I didn't have time to check that.
When it
I
was all
don't know
over,
the
she was
answer to
still
that.
standing there, I would say.
What's that?
No. I say when it was all over, here was this pillar of salt. I mean, there wasn't anybody to see it because they're all burned up.
And he didn't need it for his herd for
No.
salt.
The funny thing is, everybody watching on Facebook, everybody on Facebook knows the answer and they can't call in. Call.
Good grief.
Connie.
Oh, jeez.
I don't think we picked that up. You want to repeat that?
Yeah.
Ah.
Scratch everything I said at the start of this. Oh, heaven.
Oh, they're all gonna be wondering what we're
Okay.
laughing about. Couldn't hear that.
Okay, so his unnamed wife became a pillar of salt. And yeah, I don't know why that. That'll be on the welcoming video maybe. So then early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. So he probably thought, well, they're all gone. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, verse 29, he remembered Abraham. There you go. And he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. Okay. So Lot and his two daughters actually settle in the mountains. Okay?
In a cave.
Yeah, in a cave. Probably lived out the rest of his life in a cave, which is odd. So in verse 36, we find something, we read where both the daughters become pregnant by Lot. They hatch a scheme. So let's talk a little bit about that. Again, how could the girls think that incest was okay?
They weren't thinking that.
They weren't
They were
thinking that?
that they were never going to see another human being,
Okay,
and they would never have any children.
right. And so Dad can do that, and we'll carry on the line. Okay, so whose fault is this? Can this not be Lot's fault too? Lot knew that Abraham
Was
You
out
know,
there.
was out there, would do anything for him, had women that, or had men that could father children, and he could do that for his daughters, couldn't he? But he didn't.
Well, but
He chose.
those daughters were so dumb they didn't even know that Abraham was out there. I mean, they didn't have.
I'm not
any knowledge.
excusing them for their actions. I'm just saying that,
No, I mean,
I know.
it's Lot's fault that his daughters were that
Right.
ignorant of what was really going on.
I think
Well,
so.
they grew up in such a depraved
Yes.
society that,
That's what I think too.
Yeah.
That their
They
mind was
grew
warped as
up
well, so they,
In that culture where there was
Yeah.
no morality.
no morality, me first, and we need to get pregnant, and this is the
Yeah.
only means by which we can do it. So, if maybe over time, had they not acted this way, he may have come to his senses and said, hey, you girls need to,
Yeah.
have a husband.
Yeah.
We don't know. But he didn't. So, they both have sons. So what become of these sons of Lot? They become who? The
The leader of the Moabites
and the
and the
Ammonites.
Ammonites.
Two of Israel's greatest enemies, the Moabites and the Ammonites. Thank you very much. And Israel never conquered them, these two groups. Moses was forbidden to attack them, Deuteronomy 2:9. And for reasons God only knows, David's great-grandmother by the name of Ruth was from Moab. Yeah, from Moab. And who descended from King David?
Jesus.
Jesus. Correct.
Also, Moses didn't Moses marry? Wasn't Moses' wife?
A Moabite?
Yeah.
I think she is.
Okay. Oh, I don't know exactly. Now, so this is the end of Lot, but Lot is actually mentioned, oddly enough, in the New Testament. In 2 Peter, we turn to 2 Peter, I'll get it in my new translation. 2 Peter 2. Seven and 8. 2 Peter 2, 7 and 8. This is what floors me. This is from the New Living Translation. You there?
2, 7, and 8.
Uh-huh. But God also rescued Lot out of Sodom because he was a righteous man who was sick of the shameful immorality of the wicked people around him. Yes, Lot was a righteous man who was tormented in his soul by the wickedness he saw and heard day after day. What?
So then something happened to Lot that
That we
we
were
didn't know
told
about.
Exactly. Because we are all completely on the other side of this. I know, it's just like, what? I mean, I'm almost like not buying it. It's like, is this, is he playing with us here? I mean, what's Peter? I mean, is it tongue in cheek? But no. You know what yours says? Same thing?
7 and 8.
Yeah.
Mine said in 7 it says, and if he rescued Lot, a righteous man who was distressed by the filthy lies of lawless men, for that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue godly men from trials and to hold the unrighteous for the day of judgment while continuing their punishment. If this is so.
Yeah, mine, the New Living does not say if this is so. Is that the NIV?
NIV.
Okay, the commentary or whatever, is that, on mine it says, just as God rescued Lot from Sodom, so he is able to rescue us from the temptations and trials we face in a wicked world. Lot was not sinless, but he put his trust in God and was spared when Sodom was destroyed. God also will judge those who cause the temptations and trials, so we need never worry about justice being done.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's an odd twist, isn't it? It's like, wow, because I would have never come to that conclusion just from the Old Testament
Well,
account.
that's why I thought it had to be something else.
Yeah, the only thing, I guess the things you can say in Lot's favor just from the Old Testament part is, A, he was obedient. I mean, he was hesitant, but he did. He didn't just say, no, I'm going to go down with them too.
Yeah.
And he did protect the angels. I mean, it's a warped sense of, solution.
Hey.
But he did know what they were doing was wrong.
Yes.
So, I mean, you have to give the credit where credit's due, but that's little.
True.
That's so
But
small.
still, I mean, even before I gave my life to the Lord, because of the influences that I had had
Mm-hmm.
early on, there were just some things I couldn't do.
Yeah.
I could do other things, but some things,
Yeah.
no, you just can't do that against the Lord.
Right.
So I could see Lot, yeah, I mean,
But as long as we have breath,
yes,
there's still the opportunity
yes.
Right.
to turn to the Lord.
Right. And again, this is a snippet of Lot's life,
Yeah.
an account. I would cringe to think if I look back on my entire life and there's snippets that taken,
Yeah.
that guy's burning in hell. He has no chance whatsoever.
Yes.
I don't want to focus on that part. So maybe the part we don't know, and that's where Peter's talking about.
Yeah.
It's just
Evidently,
wasn't mentioned.
Peter knew something that we didn't know.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. Had to be able to write that.
Because I don't, I mean, I believe every word that is in this Bible. And I don't think Peter or any of the others would have written something that was not God enlightened. He enlightened them on that, or they would not put that in here.
Do you think that Peter knew the story of Lot. I mean, Genesis, I mean,
Yeah.
the scrolls were there for them to read and study.
Yeah.
Or Jesus talked about it or something. I mean, he had to have known, obviously, because he mentions it. But I would have thought that they would have, of course, they weren't as learned a man as Paul was, but Paul would have probably come to the same conclusion reading Genesis that we would have, correct? But Peter sets us straight. So that's why we don't really know what's in a person's heart. I mean, some actions do speak loudly. We're supposed to bear fruit and it's supposed to show. But in the end, God's the final judge and God looks at the heart.
I'm glad that he's the final judge, not
Yes.
me and not anybody else around him.
Well, it makes life a lot easier if you think about
Yes,
it,
it does.
because we have to live for an audience of one,
Yeah.
and that's it.
And
I
sometimes,
like for you guys to like me, every one of you, but if you don't, as long as God does, and I'm on His, that's good. It's much better than it's the other way. And I mean, 6 is more than 1, but that 1 triumphs over 6.
Yes, yes,
Right?
yes.
So it does, in some ways, make it easier. And He's very forgiving.
Yeah, it is.
But you can't get away with anything. Right? All right, any final thoughts on Lot? It's like a twist at the end, like, where'd that come from? Completely veered in the other direction. So. Okay, well then, we'll have a closing prayer and we'll finish, and everyone have a great Halloween. Father God, we again thank you for this study on Lot, and thank you, Lord, that the prayers of a righteous person do availeth much, Lord, and we're just so thankful for that, and thankful for those who have prayed on our behalf and still continue to do so, and we're thankful, Lord, that you give us the opportunity to pray for others as well, Lord. We know how powerful and effective prayer can be, and Lord, we just we thank you for this study, and we look forward to another study again next week. Lord, just help guide and direct us, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Adios.
Donna, have you taken a cold?
No,
Just
allergies.
allergies?